didn't really take that much work on my part. Music and dance is so rich, and I am surrounded by all these incredibly expressive, talented castmates, and I'm moved by their performance each and every time. I mean, something transformative actually happens inside of my body. It's like you I can't really explain it, and I think that that's what music can do.
The craziest thing just happened to me. 1 second I'm getting an MRI, and the next second,
oh God, an earthquake.
People are singing to me. Almost as if they were singing what they were all thinking out loud. Some songs are sung to me by complete strangers, others by my closest friends and family.
This is the first thing that I find remotely interesting about you.
Welcome to Paley Front Row, presented by Citi. I'm Anthony Bresnikan of Vanity Fair and your host for this conversation celebrating Zoey's extraordinary playlist. And before we get into it, I want to ask you to consider supporting the Paley Center, a nonprofit dedicated to great storytelling, education programs, conversations like this one with the stars and creators of your favorite shows. And they also help preserve TV's history and legacy for future generations through the Paley Archive. So to chip in and help support, please go to paleycenter.org to donate. All right, so today we welcome members of the cast and creative team behind Zoey's extraordinary playlist, an incredible ensemble of performers. They balance the series' dramatic, comedic, and often romantic storylines. They also do that in song and while dancing. And so we're delighted to be able to speak with them today. Let me begin the introductions with Austin Winsberg, executive producer, creator, Mandy Moore, the producer, choreographer, Jane Levy, who plays Zoey, Skylar Austin, who plays Max, Zoey's coworker, her friend, who's also harboring a secret crush, Alex Newell, who plays Mo, Zoey's lion-hearted friend and neighbor, who also has a vulnerable side, and John Clarence Stewart as Simon, a coworker who's struggling with his own loss. He's trying to figure things out in his life while also becoming a part of Zoey's love triangle with Max. Then we have her family, Mary Steenburgen as her mom, who holds the family together while Zoey's father is struggling with an illness. We have Peter Gallagher as Mitch, Zoey's dad, who I guess you could say he's locked away inside his own body due to progressive supranuclear palsy, which is it's a real illness, and it's based in part on Winsberg's experiences with his own father, who had that and had trouble expressing himself. And of course, then back at the workplace, there's Lauren Graham as Zoey's sometimes sweet, sometimes a little sinister and troublesome boss, Joan. But as you know, music, it speaks to us internally, and it unites people, it brings them together. And we've brought the cast of Zoey's Extraordinary Playlist together right here. So thank you, everybody, for being here. There's no audience, so I'll applaud for you. You know, we go through life thinking we understand people, but there's that saying, you know, you never know what someone else is going through. But this show is about someone who does, right? Is that a good way of looking at what this tries to do with music and the way Zoey peers into the inner lives of the people surrounding her? We'll start with Austin.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the big mission statements and ideas of the show is that can you ever really know what someone else is thinking or feeling, and don't judge a book by its cover. And Zoey is somebody who comes into this world as a computer programmer, hiding behind her desk, not used to interacting with others in that kind of way. And because of this new power that she gets, is forced to start to understand people on a deeper level and see them differently and listen more. And so this whole show is about connectivity and empathy and trying to understand people in a deeper way. And the more that she gets involved in other people's lives, the more that she begins to grow and understand and stop seeing the world in shades of black and white and start seeing the world more in shades of gray.
What is it you think makes a musical the right vehicle for a show about empathy?
I think that musical numbers are a way, when you typically in musicals like on stage or something, is a way where people can no longer express what they're feeling in words, where the emotions get so high and that you have to express them in this bigger musical way.
Musicals have always been about peering into the inner soul of the person who's singing that song, right?
Absolutely. And I think Alex Mo says it in the pilot where he says, you know, the best songs are the ones that can reveal, remember the exact line, Alex?
The best song can reveal the deepest, darkest, most inner wants of a person, and sometimes a good song can make you feel things words can't.
Look at that, nailing the line like
Wow.
months later.
I put him on the spot there. He nailed it.
Definitely paraphrased.
So, you know, and songs can express the deepest emotions that we talk, I think in the pilot says like love and romance and anger and hatred and all that stuff. So we're always looking for songs that cut to the core of human emotion and then put those songs into people's mouths, into people's bodies, so that Zoey is seeing a real glimpse, a real window into their souls.
I think one of our big assets are these hit songs, because they already reside in so many of us. And they're already part of us. And so when we call them up and we put them in a compelling context and try not to screw it up, it just gives the audience permission to come along with us, I think. And because these are hit songs, they're brilliant songs. So they do capture, you know, human moments there with real economy and real power.
So everybody in the cast has different degrees of music and dance experience. I wonder who was the most nervous? Which of you was like, this really isn't my wheelhouse, but I'm going to give it a try?
For good reason. But I also really wanted to learn the language, you know, however late in life I started to learn it, it was important to me. Especially, you know, to work with Austin and Mandy on such a beautiful idea. And the way Mandy works is to not require that you be some skilled dancer, but that you understand what it is that you're feeling and you express that, you know, using your body. And it never felt like, here's the part where I'm acting, now I stop, now I start dancing. She's so organic in the way she pulls it all together that it was so much fun for all of us.
Did I see John raise his hand?
Yeah, it was stressful in the beginning. I mean, I've never done a musical in this capacity before, and I've never danced in this capacity before. So I think every step of the way, I was really depending on the people around me very much. So kudos to like Mandy and Austin and each of the teammates that I was working with. I found a lot of inspiration in how they were approaching things, right? Because it was a crunch. It's not like rehearsing a musical for some odd weeks, getting your tech and all of this stuff. It's a very short timeline and you have to execute. And then when the camera's rolling, you have to deliver, you know? And it wasn't until further on in the season that I started feeling like I had my feet under me when I was doing the scenes. So that was largely due to Mandy and Austin and the folks you see right here. Yeah.
Jane, how was it for you? Because as the audience for these performances, Zoey doesn't get to partake in them until much later in the season when I think it's episode 8, Zoey's Extraordinary Glitch, where she performs all of the songs. So what was it like for you watching everybody else sing and dance, but having to like, I guess be the witness for that rather than the performer?
A lot of people have asked this question about how I came up with different reactions, because we see time and time again Zoey going through this superpower moment where she can read people's minds, but every episode 5 or 6 times I am confronted with the art of Lauren and Mary and John and Skylar and Alex, and it affects me. So it's really like and Mandy's choreography, of course, and Austin's right. But I personally, Jane, the actress, am moved by the musicality, and so it informs my performance in this way that doesn't take that much work.
When you finally got to sing in your episode, in the Glitch episode, which was the most daunting, and which song was your favorite that you got to perform?
They were all daunting in different ways. I guess pressure was the most technical with choreography, and I really wanted to get it right and make Mandy proud, and that was stressful. But then there was also How Do I Live, which is an extremely emotional moment, and lip syncing while crying and then actually singing live while crying was hard, and I learned how to do that in the moment. And Crazy was just, I'm so blown away by Mandy Moore. How many extras were in the background of that, and how much time did you have to rehearse? I mean, that was one of those days where we were all like, I think all of us were like, we might not pull this off, and then we did, and like the energy shifted on set, and I was just, that was a life changing. That changed the rest of shooting, I felt like, in some ways.
Tell us the story of that, Mandy.
Well, you know, the turnaround on this show is so crazy, right? Because we do the episodes in 8 days, and you know, to put up 5 to 6 musical numbers in 8 days, anyone who knows television knows that, like, that's incredibly crazy. So when we got to Jane's episode, that particular number, Austin and I had talked a lot about wanting it to feel very dance heavy and have a tone about it that was, I guess, in loose terms, maybe a contemporary dance way, which is also difficult to pull off in television because it takes a lot of rehearsal to create something of that vibe and that energy. And then, of course, never had Jane, like literally, I think we had her the morning of, and had this crazy...
No, the night before for like 5 minutes, remember?
Oh, right. Literally 5 minutes. And we were shooting in this college, what would you call it, Austin? Like a student union
like
kind of area?
It was a student union in a college in Vancouver.
Yeah. And they weren't able to like lock it down because school is still in place. So imagine I've got 50 dancers plus all the school going on around us. The band is rehearsing upstairs, and I am screaming at dancers, like trying to count it out. And all of a sudden they start playing Crazy upstairs. Like I thought I was going to lose my mind. And then Jane comes in. I'm like, okay, so you're going to enter here and you're just going to walk here, and there's going to be like a lot of things happening, and just lay down on the couch and then get up. And then it was like, sorry, we got to wrap you. Bye. We'll see you tomorrow morning. So it was fast and furious, but I loved that number. It turned out so good.
I love that there's so many of the performances are these bravura sequences, but then some of the funniest moments are when there's awkwardness, and you've just broken it down to like Jane singing "I Saw Mommy Kissing Santa Claus," or Skylar joining her to cover for her in the pressure sequence. Like, can you tell me about choreographing awkwardness instead of grace?
Well, you know, with Skylar, honestly, I didn't have him come to rehearsal, and that was all part of it, is that he had to just follow along with Jane. So honestly, that's all Skylar and Jane. I had nothing to do with that.
Skylar, tell us about that. So you just showed up cold, but you knew the song.
Yeah, it was really fun. I mean, like we actually shot that one for quite a long time because there were a lot of setups. That was like a real sequence. Sometimes like we shoot things and it's basically one shot, and that one. So like I definitely by the end of it kind of knew, but tried to dumb my brain down as much as possible. Like would really only watch when I'm watching Zoey like as Max during takes. And then like, but I have to still give Mandy credit no matter what, because she always refined little things. She's like, so I noticed that you're hitting her 1 count late with this move. You know, like making sure I never got too good or like too rehearsed, and keeping it in that sweet spot of like somebody who really doesn't know what's going on around. But it was like one of my favorite days on set because I couldn't make a mistake. Like there was nothing bad I could do, you know, kind of bulletproof.
Lauren, I want to ask you about Joan. She's like, sometimes she's a friend, sometimes she's a foe. She's like the real variable in this show. Even though we see her inner thoughts, I still feel like she's very enigmatic. Tell me about the role she plays, what you try to bring to her, both as friend and antagonist.
Well, we've seen these like tough boss lady characters, you know, and I just really thought I wanted to make something more specific and more odd. And I just thought, you know, here's a person who's under an extreme amount of pressure, whose marriage is crumbling, who's probably been the only woman in the office for most of her career. And here's this young woman who she kind of sees herself in, but she wants her to succeed, but she's frustrated when she doesn't get it quickly enough. So it's, you know, that the feeling of being in that character is like always like under pressure and exasperated, and why aren't people, you know, bringing me things more quickly? And then I just really wanted her to have a heart, and I love Jane in real life so much, and I just wanted to bring that, like, you know, here's a sort of prodigy, but I also can't be soft on her. And then the other thing I thought about Joan is that she just kind of doesn't know how to have friends, like how to have girlfriends. So I was always trying to think about that with Jane. Like, I love her, I love Zoey, but also I don't know how to express that. So I just do it wrong, or like give her an inappropriate present, or like, you know, do something awkward physically, or I don't know, it was so much fun what I got to do.
In terms of like performance metaphor, I always think of her as like the singer who's in the spotlight all alone, and the audience is out there, but sort of in the darkness. Like, I feel like there's a little bit of narcissism to her, like where she's sort of aware of other people and trying to connect, but
yes.
you know, I don't know, am I picking up what you're putting down?
Yes, I agree. Well, she's had to be that way, hasn't she? I mean, she's had to be tough, and she just maybe hasn't had a lot of allies, and it's still very much a man's world. So maybe she kind of like sequestered herself in order to survive.
So Skylar and John, I think one of the reasons we care so much about the relationships between these two guys and Zoey is because we care about the guys themselves. They're real characters in and of themselves. And I wondered what your favorite dimension to each of them is. Like, what is it you're able to bring personally, and what is it in the writing that that you think makes them just unique, interesting guys?
For me, I really love Max's integrity. That was like something that Austin was like amazing at giving, and I wanted to make sure was definitely there in every way. There's like something in episode 10 when they have a kind of a heated argument at Zoey's desk, and you know, it's like Austin gives us the gift of giving us like flaws. And in that moment, Zoey has like calling Max selfish. And that is like so out of bounds for me standing in Max's shoes. And it was fun to like have a really differing point of view from the protagonist of this show. And like, who knows who agreed with Max in that point. And that's something that's very brave of Austin to do. But then like Jane always making those choices to like be unapologetically what's written. And that's what I tried to bring to the table too. And so, you know, I root for Max in many ways in relation to Zoey, and then also separately in ways just like independently from Zoey.
For sure. I mean, I feel like with Simon, the things that I connected to most are vulnerability. It's this process of having to open up, this process of meeting someone that has the key to the inside where you can't hide. And then how do you navigate the world when you can't hide anymore? And sometimes in those cases, it's like a floodgate. And when it opens, you can't shut it. And the ramifications of that unfurl. And you are not a villain or a hero. You're just on your journey trying to be the best that you can. And I think that's Austin, really trying to embody the humanity and the experience of processing grief, being honest about what that is. I just love that it's not too clean. I think that sometimes we get afraid. We get afraid to get into the messy parts of things. And it's important that people see those parts of our humanity. And that's why music is also such a beautiful tool in that respect. Yeah.
Alex, I want to ask you about episode 4, which really is a beautiful showcase for your work. It's titled Zoey's Extraordinary Neighbor. And we get to see a lot of Mo's life beyond interactions with Zoey. And I wondered if you could tell me what it meant to you to create that episode, and what you hope people take away from it.
One, it was wonderful and wonderfully cathartic in a way, because it is parallel to my own story of growing up in church and not always feeling comfortable with my faith and who I was as a person, and exploring what that really meant to me. And to get to tell that story so beautifully, and to be able to trust someone to tell it so beautifully and write it so beautifully like Austin and his staff did, it was one of the best things ever.
How did it parallel your life? Austin, did you discuss it with Alex? Like, how did you?
Oh yeah,
How did you come up with a collaboration on this?
When Alex talked to me about his experience and relationship with the church, it really was like a deep dive into what were the problems and what did he encounter. And then it was all just about trying to be true and authentic to Alex's own experience. So that's been a lot of my philosophy with the show. And, you know, I could talk about other cast members and the ways we've come at stuff together, but certainly in terms of that episode, it was very much completely rooted in Alex's own experience and what he went through, and then trying to honor that and be true to that.
It struck me, it really broke my heart because to me, it felt like the first time that we saw Mo afraid, right? Like there was something there, like Mo was such who said it? Like a bold, brave, like strong person.
Mo said it.
Mo said it. And this showed, it showed vulnerability and a little bit of fear. Is that what I'm supposed to pick up from it? And was there a moment in that episode that was particularly meaningful to you, Alex, or a song that you?
Yeah, I mean, everyone's confidence is their own armor. I think the most confident people are the most hurt people. The most confident people, outwardly people, are the people that are trying to hide something. And they put on this confidence and they wear this confidence and they go through the world with this confidence so nobody can break that spirit. And so being one's true, authentic self is probably one of the hardest things anybody in this walk of life could do. To sit steadfast in who you are as a person, who you are in the mind, body, and soul is the hardest thing to do, especially as an actor, because we're told to be this, be that, be this person, be that, create this person, create that person. So the fear is, if I let this person in or if I let people in, they're just going to let me down. I think that's where Mo was with all of that, because we saw it time and time again at church, where all the pulpit does is preach love and teach love and say that you're supposed to love. And when you show who you are, you think that you're going to get this love, you end up getting hate or dejected. And that is that fear that Mo had, going back to church and showing one's true self in their place of worship.
Mary, can we talk about your work with Peter? I mean, you have a really interesting job on this, and sometimes he's locked away. He's he's acting almost with these intense eyes and the ability to type a little bit and ring his buzzer. And yet other times during the fantasy sequences, he's singing and you're singing, and that's where we really see I feel like that's where we see the past that these two had. Tell me about creating that with Peter and with Austin and with Mandy and showing us a relationship that we never really get to witness in the present.
Well, the actuality of working with Peter, I think for every single one of us, was such a lovely thing. He's just a really fine human being. He's very funny. He's very quirky and completely lovable. And so the connection to him, I think, was there. I know Jane felt it so strongly, and we all did in the family. This idea that this person that in real life we adored so much, that character was going to die, was just, very almost too real, too hard to deal with. So I didn't have to work at that at all. That was just a gift from Peter Gallagher that, and then Austin just, I don't know, it was like alchemy, the way he did those family scenes where somehow, even though Peter wasn't saying a word, you felt everybody's voice in this scene. And in the really one dance number that we had together that we're both connected to each other was the song Perfect. Mm-hmm. And what I wanted for that was that you got who they are now, but who they have always been together. And I think the way that Mandy and Austin did that and the story around it helped that make that real. But honestly, it was very easy to create anything with Peter because he was also so committed to the PSP, learned so much about it, and it felt so real what he was doing. And he and I both had parents that died of quite related diseases. So I've been through the experience of loving someone very much that couldn't speak to me for 2.5 years. So in my case, it was my mom. And it's quite remarkable what you can still know from somebody without them being able to talk. And so, but in the case of this, it was just kudos to Peter Gallagher.
Austin, I wondered if you could talk to us about your father and what you wanted Peter to capture about him and what you wanted this show to say about somebody who loses the ability to communicate with the people that they love, even though they're still technically, like they're still there.
Yeah, well, the good news is I'm not surprisingly vulnerable right now, so that's good. I drank coffee this morning. I think it's making me extra emotional this morning. But yes, I mean, I watched my dad decline over the course of really 9 months. From onset, from diagnosis to death was about 9 months. Official diagnosis. And so you're just watching a very vibrant, dynamic, outgoing, expressive human being lose all of those abilities, lose the ability to speak, use the ability to walk, lose really all the abilities to communicate. And, you know, it took me a while to try to figure out how to put that in words and try to figure out what it was like becoming a dad while losing my dad. And so, you know, I just felt like I needed to tell that story at some point, and I needed to show what that was like. And the whole genesis, the genesis of this idea really stemmed from the place of what if the way that my dad saw the world during that time when he couldn't really express himself was through musical numbers. And just that idea made me smile. And it took something that felt so sad and tragic in our family and made it feel at least a little bit joyful. And so that was really the goal. I mean, every story that happens over the course of the season in the family was something that happened to our family over the course of those 9 months. There's very little creative license there. There's degrees of it, but like you know, everything from the taboo buzzer to writing lemonade to crying uncontrollably to falling down the stairs to bringing in caregivers, all of those, to celebrating their last anniversary, all of those things were things that happened in our house. And so it was very important to me to be authentic to that experience and to write from my memory of that. And then on top of it, once Peter came in, there's not a lot of research on PSP. PSP is a pretty rare disease. There's not a lot of video that you can watch to really see what that looks like. But Peter so channeled it. And not only did he channel it, but he kind of looks like the way my dad looked. And so I would come on set sometimes, and I had an ability to compartmentalize it a lot while we were writing it or while we were working on it. And then I would come onto set and I would see a moment between him and Mary or a moment between him and Jane, which would so bring me back to a memory, so bring me back to a moment in time that there were times where it would take my breath away and I would have to leave set and get emotional about it. So I just wanted to be true to our experience. And I think that was a quality that Peter also wanted to bring to it. And I think certainly the emotion that Mary and Jane and Andrew and everybody brought to those scenes was just being true and accurate to what we went through. And I think based on the response we've gotten from people after the fact, I think it's like these things that I worry about are so specific. It's interesting, like the things that are so personal and so specific, somehow those things become so universal. And I think what we've seen is a lot of people have reached out to me, and I know to other people too, just about losing loved ones, loss of loved ones, people who are going through their own neurological conditions or other kinds of sickness, that they're seeing their own stories told through this story. So the fact that we can show that in some way and maybe show a path towards grieving and growth and bring awareness to PSP were things I didn't anticipate or expect going in, but have been a nice byproduct of this experience.
Austin talked about his father, and I'm sure you've discussed that relationship a lot with him, and the way you perform the character of Mitch, and the way that the illness creates this expression in the eyes, but also the way that conveys the yearning within the person who has it to kind of speak or to communicate when they can't. What was it that you felt you were, I mean, can you walk us through the process of performing somebody who's unable to express anything?
Well, first of all, I didn't really know what I was doing. I was pretty much just, I'd done a lot of research in terms of what happened in the brain and which part of the brain and what kind of, fortunately, the disease, it finds different expression in different people. But I had a long history with my mom who had Alzheimer's for 20 years. Mm-hmm. And I would, when I was with her when she died, it was a kind of affirmation that those suspicions I had about the extent of our connection were genuine. And I remember when the English language was just about to leave her entirely, I'd see her and and if I made her feel loved, if I was dancing with her, or if I held her or sang to her songs, she'd say, "That was real." And so in spite of, and she was a brilliant lady, helped develop penicillin and so on, but in spite of what was not available to her, and for the years after that, she was still in some way able to communicate. I could feel it. I could sense it. I could see in her eyes that. And so that sort of lived with me. And I felt very comfortable that Austin because he is a wonderful writer and because he lived this story. And also because he's written musicals and he knew how song and words can fit together, that I was in good hands, because I figured if I was really way off the mark, he'd tell me. And if I was in the ballpark, hopefully he'd be too moved to stay. And then I'd think, okay. So it was really just understanding what my physical limitations were, which were stressful in terms of my spine, in terms of the gaze, in terms of not lowering your gaze below the horizon line, the rest of your body. But within those limitations, as soon as you accept them, you just sort of hope your work finds an expression that's meaningful.
I think what makes this show so exquisitely beautiful, and kudos to Austin, is we don't just show someone who can't communicate. It's a fantasy. So Zoey can communicate with him. And so as an audience, we get to live through that fantasy and that extreme comfort of actually being able to talk to one another. And I think that that's what's so genius about our show. And, Zoey gets to be comforted by her dad when she's losing him. I think that's why the finale is so moving, is as an audience member, first of all, we all have experienced loss, and it's heartbreaking to relive that, but we don't just show loss, we show love in that moment. Instead of watching her father take her final breaths, he holds her tight and dances with her and says, "I'll always be with you." And that fantastical element that I got to explore with Peter was just so incredibly moving.
That's one that's going to choke me up if we keep talking about it. But Austin, there's so many moments like that where you step away from the grief and focus on, I don't know if joy is the right word, but when he's passing away, can you tell me about the decision not to have the family? I mean, the family is gathered around him, but Zoey steps away into the living room away from that and has father-daughter dance with him. Tell me about the genesis.
Like a Barbara Walters moment where you're just drawing out the kids. Yeah, that was a selfish moment, I think, for me. I think that was a wish fulfillment moment.
Mm-hmm.
Not selfish. Look at what it did to the whole entire world.
Selfish in the extent that I was there with my dad at his bedside to watch him pass. And I was there through a very painful end that didn't have to go that way. And so, someone else want to talk? So I wish I wasn't there to see that. I think part of me, the selfish part of me wishes I didn't have to live that and live with the memory of that. So I didn't want Zoey to have to live in that space. So I like the idea of being able to, that in that moment, Mitch wanted to take her away from that too. That Mitch didn't want her to see that he was in some way in death trying to protect her from the end. And also to let her know that he lives on with her. So that's sort of the selfish act of that, which is just the selfish maybe / wish fulfillment act, which is, I want to comfort you in these painful final moments of grief and not have you see the end. And so this is my way to distract you from that and to let you and I have that final moment together that hopefully gives you the strength to move on.
I know we're running short on time, but I have 2 other sequences in the show that I am dying to ask you all about. One is, it's the performance by Sandra Mae Frank and performers from Deaf West Theater Company performing Fight Song in sign language. And there's no singing. There's also no subtitles, which I thought was a really interesting choice. You just have to recognize the melody and follow along if you're somebody who can hear. Tell me about why you decided to do that, Austin. And Mandy, if you could tell me about your involvement in choreographing that, because it's very much, the lyrics are presented in sign language. I think you could see that as almost a kind of dance, right?
Ah, interesting. Okay. Yes. So Austin's amazing idea to not have subtitles. I just love this idea from the beginning that as an audience member, you're forced to sit and feel and watch and observe and not know. Like maybe you don't know, and maybe that's okay, that you feel something from these people that are communicating in a way that you maybe don't understand, which might be the way that they feel when we talk and they can't hear it, right?
Yeah.
So when Austin originally talked to me about it, he had said he wanted to do this song only using ASL and then dance. And what was really interesting, he and I have talked about this 10 cents, but you think that ASL and dance can live in a synonymous world, that they can just all of a sudden like connect, because it does look like dance. The gesture of hand movement while moving looks like dance. It is not dance at all. And one of the most beautiful moments, I think, for me personally on the show was learning about ASL and learning ASL, because that's all part of it. Is I had to learn how to communicate to a community of people that I don't have the tools to communicate with them. So that was a really beautiful exchange of, first of all, learning how we would break down the song with ASL, because I don't know how much anybody knows about it, but the way that I may sign fight may be totally different than the way that Skylar wants to sign fight, or the way Austin wants to, just the way that we all speak in different tones and nuances. It's the same thing. So one of the very first things that we had to all agree upon with the, I think it was 12, right? 12 dancers in Sandra. Sorry, it might be 11. But one of the first things we had to do was come to a consensus about how we all felt we wanted to communicate this song. And imagine what that's like when you've got 12 different people all speaking in sign language, by the way, with a translator, and watching that exchange too, where I would say, okay, can we talk about what the fight or what the sign might be for fight? And someone would say, well, I think it's this, or somebody might say like, it's this, and just that exchange and understanding of how we were going to make the same language happen together was so much fun. Okay, so there's that. Then I get really excited talking about this. Sorry.
No, good.
Then it was a matter of it was a matter for my department to not stomp on the beauty of the art of that language. So when I got out of my head that this had to be dance in ASL, and really it was more of me structuring the ASL in a way that was right for camera, that was right for story, that was right for the characters, that was right for Zoey's experience, that was right for Howie's experience and Sandra's experience, or Abigail's experience. That's when I realized that it's really just about me kind of packaging it in a way that we could tell the story to an audience that maybe does understand sign language, so they would understand ASL, because we had a bunch of people that tuned in, a huge community that tuned in to watch that. But then also have it expressed in a way that someone that doesn't understand ASL, maybe as yourself, could get something from that and understand it.
We could keep talking for a long time, I think, but I think I have to wrap it up now. You've all been very generous with your time. But the last thing I want to ask you about is something that I think you all participated in, which was the last musical sequence in the show, in the series, American Pie at the funeral. I wonder if we could just each of you go through and share your memory or your experience in shooting that, singing your part for that, performing it, and Austin and Mandy, the insights into, maybe you could kick us off with just why you wanted this epic song to be the conclusion for the series.
There was an idea that came up while we were shooting episode 2, where I was talking to our producing director, Adam Davidson, and we were just talking about different kinds of ideas that we could do on the show. And one of the ideas that he threw out was, what if you do an entire act that's a musical number? And I was like, that's bold. We would need to pick a song that would support the story of that, and it would need to be long enough to support that. So what are some songs that do that? And we're like, well, Hotel California, maybe there's some Led Zeppelin or Pink Floyd stuff in there. Oh, what about American Pie? And when we said American Pie, I thought of the idea that just instantly the words, "The Day the Music Died." And I thought, oh, well, what if there's some parallel there that song happens after Mitch passes away? And so it really started from there. The idea of a bravura, is that the word?
Yeah.
Bravura, you said it. I'm copying you now. Big number that could be like not only impressive in its technical achievement, but that could feel like an appropriate emotional goodbye tonally for Mitch, but also that allows everybody to have their moment and have the story feel like a conclusion, but also a continuation at the same time.
It begins, if my memory serves, with Mary, right? You start the song in a very quiet way in the car.
I think I start just as soon as Jane and Andrew and Alice and we all get out of the car. And it was raining that day in Vancouver. And John Turteltaub, who's directing, decided that was not enough rain. And so we were literally being drenched. We had umbrellas, but it really didn't make much of a difference. And so the song begins in the rain. But once we enter the house, it's an unbroken shot that everybody poured their heart into. No matter who you were, you knew where you were supposed to be. In background, people that knew exactly which 3 glasses they were to pick up and put behind a counter, and you'd walk past to get to your next part that you're supposed to be at, and you'd see people lying down under counters so they wouldn't be seen by camera. It was one of the most joyous things I've ever done in my entire career, even though it's also one of the saddest, but because it was like running away and joining the circus. It took every single person being exactly where they were and doing it perfectly, or the whole thing was going to fall apart. And it was just such a joy to be a part of it. I was so honored to be a part of that shot and that song. And it was kind of weird how this song did make sense in the end for every single one of us. You know, you knew what you were singing about. And it was one of the coolest things I've ever done in my whole career. I loved it.
John, what was your part? Forgive me for not remembering exactly, but what was your lyric, and how do you think that fit in with who your character's arc throughout the season?
I mean, don't put me on the spot. Okay. Let's see.
First up, you're the first one we saw on the party. Yeah, you were the first one.
Did you write the Book of Love? Does it start with that?
Oh, did you write the Book of Love? Yeah. And do you have faith in God above if the Bible tells you so? Do you believe in rock and roll? Can music save your mortal soul? I think that is like spot on the show. Like, can music save your mortal soul? Did you write the Book of Love? To Zoey, this feeling of having a connection with someone that is kind of intangible, that you're still trying to wrap your mind around. You don't know what it is, but this person has awakened this part of you that is confusing and exhilarating and kind of shifts the entire framework of your life. And to the thing that everyone else said, there was this moment, I don't know where the clip is, but there's this clip of the set dressing of one of the scenes getting pulled as the number is happening in real time. I've never felt so connected to everyone in a moment. It was it was profound. The fact that everybody was in the same, I feel, the same spiritual, emotional, technical space, that there was this honor to Austin, to his father, to the show itself. It was sacred. That's the only way that I can put it. It felt sacred in that moment. And that's all I gotta say. Yeah.
Skylar, what's your memory from that day?
I remember there being this importance and no one wanting to not just mess up, but let down the story. But also it was really like a fun energy on set. I think everyone really knew their why. You know, they knew why they were there, what their part was, both technically and lyrically, and of course spiritually. But then again, like, I know that there was a lot of pressure on that day, but I do also feel like it did go off without a hitch. And that's because, like, we all were just like excited to do it. It's a long song. It felt like 2 minutes every time we did a take. I remember we were all like, are we done? Because it's like, you memorize, just like in a musical, you memorize your track, you understand where you're supposed to go, and okay, that's my first cue. And then you get to fill it in with this nuance. And like, you know, between Austin and Mandy and the director and Adam, and like, you know, there's a moment that John and I share. I mean, of course I have my moment on the stairwell, which is very clearly what Max is talking about in relation to Zoey, but I love the moment with Simon where Max, they just shake hands. It's just like a sign of respect. It's like, there's no competition. There's no, I'll see you in season 2. Like, who's gonna get the girl, like, shake. You know, John and I have had countless conversations about this and our relationship towards each other as men, but also as Max and Simon, and like, I just love that acknowledgement and like those beautiful moments. And then, yeah, furthermore on the staircase, talking about, I met a girl who sang the blues and asked her for some happy news. She turned away. So that's pretty clearly what happened with Max. I went down to the Sacred Store. I was always thinking floor 6, and then, you know, they refused to let me play. So there were like more literal moments that were really simple from the get-go to connect to, but I think that those moments feel like moments where I clock moments where, you know, it's just, I don't know, it's just a really, really surprising day, because I thought it would be like, oh, it's that huge oneer we've been hearing about, and it's the day, and it's coming up on Friday or whatever it was. And it's just like, I've never been a part of anything where we gather after we got the shot, where we all watched playback and we all got emotional and we all knew which take was the one. And then we all just gathered in the kitchen, and there was a speech, and we all just were like, wow, we did that. Like, this is artful on top of being spiritual, on top of being for television. It just felt, yeah, just like John said, I mean, really, really important.
It was also our last day, and we really wanted to shoot that on our last day. It was very important to Mandy and I.
So Alex and Lauren, can you tell me about Mo and Joan in that sequence and what you remember from making it?
The only thing that I remember from this entire last day was a full fire drill and the fire alarm going off.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, like, we had all of that pressure that was happening, and we're like, it's a oneer, it's a 7-minute oneer, it's this, and then the alarm goes off, and we're just like, well, I guess I have to go outside right now. And it was like the perfect, like, icebreaker before doing this amazing thing that really got us back into a mindset and really grounded us. And I'm thankful for the many fire drills that we had at Zoey's playlist.
It just felt to me like it was like a ballet meets curtain call meet saying goodbye. And some of my lyrics were while the king was looking down, and I'm singing this to Jane, and every time she'd come around the corner, I would get choked up because it was such a mix of real life and show life. Like, it was our last day, and we didn't know if we were coming back. And, you know, and I say to Jane, while the king was looking down, the jester stole his thorny crown, which is sort of like I'm passing the baton to her. You know, Joan is taking off. We don't know where she'll be next. And it felt like a mentor kind of moment, which was their relationship, and maybe in some small degrees my relationship in real life with Jane.
Not small, big.
Mentors, big. So, and it was beautiful to watch everyone watching. Like, you would see at Video Village, you know, every producer, every cast member who finished already watch, and it was the most beautiful kind of feeling of everyone rooting for one another. You know, it was just a collective of like, we're all holding our breath and rooting for this thing to be perfect, because that's what we needed it to be. And it was a real feeling of ensemble. It was really special.
Jane, I saved you. Oh, go ahead, Austin.
I was just going to say one thing before Jane speaks, which is we haven't talked about it this way yet before, all of us. And I wanted everything that the cast is saying right now about their interpretation of the lyrics was very much my thought process when designating the lyrics. But I never talked about it. And a lot of these lyrics are like poetry. It's very subjective, and it's amazing to me that we all kind of saw or hopefully got the same idea behind we're all in the same headspace. It's pretty amazing to me.
But they're interesting lyrics. I mean, for 40 years, people have been projecting different ideas about what they mean. So they're very malleable.
Right, but my interpretation of what I wanted them to mean for them is the exact thing they're saying right now, which is something to discuss. So it's pretty amazing.
Jane, I saved you for last because it all comes back to Zoey and her perception of this experience of seeing people express themselves in song. What are your memories of shooting that American Pie sequence?
Well, I had the difficult task of like getting the last baton. So if I trip, all of the 6 minutes of work goes in the trash. And I was very aware of that. So Austin gave me the choice of singing live or pre-recording, and you were always generous with me about that. And I didn't want to pre-record because I wanted to be able to take as much time as possible at the end. And I don't know if I ever told you this, Austin, but for me or Mandy, as the actor doing this sequence, the way I got inside of it, at risk of sounding pretentious and like revealing my process, I was like, what if Zoe's walking around her house singing this song to herself? And while she's singing this song to herself, she's remembering all the amazing people, her community around her, now I'm gonna cry, that have helped her say goodbye to her dad and her family. And so like when in that final moment, it was like, okay, now the camera's gonna go inside Zoe's head. In this moment, this whole thing has been inside her head. I know that wasn't your intention, but it was the way that I got inside of it. And I also felt that way at the end, like around all these people that I love so much, just the support and the teamwork. And I think in a way, our series was like an exercise in how to say goodbye to someone. And this was like the final goodbye. And these are all the people that participate in Zoe's world. And it was really a really special number.
Thank you guys so much for joining us for this special Paley Front Row conversation. I think we'll all be sobbing after this. It's very emotional, but it's a good cry, right? There's a lot to be sad about in the world, but it's Austin and Mandy, you've given us a show that I think brings up really happy emotions in addition to sad emotions, and that's what life is, right? A mix of all of those things. So thank you all for watching. We'll give a shout out to City for presenting this Paley Front Row conversation. Thanks again to the cast and creative team of Zoey's Extraordinary Playlist for being such wonderful and expressive and emotional guests. Remember to be sure to support the Paley Center and consider becoming a Paley member by visiting paleycenter.org. All right, thanks everybody. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.